Thanks, Ella. Thank you, and thank you for everybody joining us today. We're so pleased that there's been so much interest in learning about the What Matters to Me project. So my name's Taylor, and I have had the absolute pleasure of leading on the What Matters to Me project and working with 11 wonderful young people and their families and support circles. So throughout the project, when speaking to professionals, a common theme and one of the main things that came up was around the consent and best interest process for working with people who may not have the capacity to consent themselves. So from this, we thought that it would be appropriate and perhaps useful for attendees if we shared the process that we followed as part of this project. So it's only a short 10-minute session, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but we hope that it's helpful for everybody. Thanks, Ella. So we, of course, had to follow the formal and legal process when doing the consent and best interest process for the young people that we was working with in regards to participating in the project. So we've been working, as I said, with 11 young people, and for each young person, we followed the mental capacity assessment with their key caregiver. So given the cohort of the young people that we was working with and our sort of main aim of working with people who are often overlooked and not included in sort of consultation and decision-making processes, we, following the assessment with the young people, it was that none of the young people were able to give consent themselves in regards to participating in the project. So that triggered the need for the best interest process to be started. And with each young person, we carried that out with not only their key caregiver, but also with a wide range of people within their sort of support circle and people that knew them best. Now, we also added on some sort of additional questions and things to think about throughout this assessment because of the plans for using lots of imagery and lots of film. And that sort of brings in a bit of an extra ethical layer of this. So apologies, some of you might have seen this already in the RICS webinar that took place back in February, where we sort of shared some of this information and thinking about how we think about whether it's in the best interest of somebody who's unable to consent themselves in regards to sort of taking and sharing images and film. So there was that side of things that we sort of fed into that best interest assessment. And some of the things we thought about through that was, how does the young person normally react when they have their photograph taken or when they're on film? And what's their sort of experience of this and how do they sort of react to things like that? Thanks, Ella. So then sort of more informally, what we done in regards to sort of practical things was we thought about how can we include the young people in this process and ensure that best interest wasn't just something that we done an assessment for right at the beginning and then that was it. It was all fine throughout the sort of 18 months, 2 years that we was working with them. We needed to think about how can we ensure that at every step of the way, we're making sure that it's in their best interest to be participating in this activity or for us to be capturing images or indeed at the sort of part further on in regards to sort of sharing those images. So how we sort of included young people was by looking at the images and the videos together and observing those reactions, sharing this and showing this to others. On a couple of the sessions that we done, we had, and this was sort of celebratory sessions that we done towards the end of our engagement period, was we created these photo cubes. So on the cubes were lots of different photographs of all the different engagement that we'd done over the sort of earlier months. And on these cubes, some were small that you can see there and some were bigger. They were detachable, so they had Velcro on the back. So whilst not able to be used by all the young people we was working with, for some young people, they were really able to look at that either closely or a bit further away. Some of them were whipping them off and taking their pictures around to show the sort of other peers and staff. So it was just a really good way to get them involved in that sort of side of things and make sure that we were seeing positive reactions to them seeing their images and what they've been done. And it just sort of gives it that little bit of clout is that this from what we can sort of assess, this has been in their best interest. So we also included families and support circles in sort of reviewing the images and the videos, and in the development of the manifesto and the films and the things that go alongside it. As I mentioned before, this meant that we was able to sort of continually assess their best interest and sort of consider the things. And the other side of it is that our media is explained. So we're sort of being consistent with the messages that we're aiming for when sharing this. So it's not sort of being left open to interpretation, which could perhaps bring in any negative side of things. So we just wanted to make sure that we would be being sort of as robust as possible with this. Thanks, Ella. So I just wanted to share with you some of the considerations that we sort of thought about at different points throughout this. So have we included the person in as much as possible? Have we observed those responses? Are we thinking about this at different points throughout the project? What's the purpose of sharing this? Is it going to have a positive impact, and who will that have a positive impact on? Is that still okay for the person that we're sort of considering and talking about? Thanks, Ella. Okay, so we will share all these slides as well afterwards. But off the back of the sort of conversations that we'd had throughout the project, we thought it would be helpful to put together a sort of short guide based on what we've done through this project. So, it's not a guide to the Mental Capacity Act or anything like that, but it sort of refers everything to it about all the sort of processes that we used and some of the sort of more formal things and some of the things that sort of practically we thought about, because we know that this is quite this is potentially a barrier to some people engaging with people with severe or profound multiple learning disabilities if they're unable to consent themselves, because this is a process and a piece of work in itself, just getting this sort of process and the sort of best interest assessments things done. But actually, even just through that, we learn a huge amount just through the best interest process. So that in itself gave us such rich learning. So in the guide, there are some examples about how we applied it in practice. We've got some sort of top tips from what we've learned through the process, and there's some links to some other useful resources and documents. So I think, unfortunately, really, really terrible timing, our website was down yesterday, and it was back up and running before we started, but I think there may be some other issues with it since we've started. So the resource is available to download in the QR code. We'll pop the link in the chat as well. But if it's not, if the server is still down, then huge apologies. But what we can do is we'll obviously make sure this is shared around to everybody that's joined us today. So thank you.